Hey, everybody, welcome to Deeply Human Leading. I'm Leanne Del Carpio, and I'm joined with Gretchen Terry-Leonard. And today we wanted to dive into the balance between speed and quality when the race for deploying AI is on, and we want to make quality decisions in the face of that acceleration. So some of you may be familiar with Klarna. It's a payments platform that allows us to have more flexibility when we go shopping. Sometimes we want to be able to buy now and pay later and have some of those kind of options available, and Klarna makes that possible. You may have seen in the recent news the last couple of months that Klarna made a move to drive more efficiency, speed, cost, perhaps measurable items. And I want to get the numbers right, but Gretchen and I were reflecting on the fact that they replaced 853 customer service employees with AI. Now, in month one, after doing that, there were 2.3 million conversations handled by AI. The resolution time actually got down to 2 minutes, and they had $60 million in projected savings. So every metric looked green. Like their dashboard for speed, efficiency, cost, it's like green, green, green. The CEO called it a success initially, and then customer satisfaction collapsed. Complaints surged, and that same CEO ended up on Bloomberg saying 3 words: we went too far. I was actually wondering, honestly, when it said that the resolution time went down to 2 minutes, if people just hung up. Like I would have hung up.
That's,
'Cause I would have been like,
I'm so frustrated.
stupid robot,
I
zero,
just
zero,
want a
zero.
human.
I
Yes,
want
I
a
just
human. Oh, they're not
want a
using zero.
human.
Let me try 444. I've done this.
I have.
But so this, and I know Gretchen and I have been looking in the news. There's other examples of organizations that are they're experimenting, they're testing. How can we deploy
Mhm.
this amazing new technology, drive greater gains in efficiency and speed? And they may also be finding that they go too far. So there's a paradox to be balanced here. Yes, we want to optimize for speed. And yes, we probably want to not stop, but slow down, pause a little bit for quality discussion, dialogue, strategic thinking, and decision making, quality decision making. So that's what we're going to dive into today. Gretchen, what do you make of the whole? Before we talk about other firms. What do you make of the whole Klarna dashboard? Looked green, but it actually ended up being like a red light in terms of customer impact.
Yeah, so the curse of the unintended consequence is that this looks really good on the surface, but what Klarna did was eliminate institutional knowledge,
Mm,
remove things that had taken them years to build, reputational
mm,
uh, bandwidth with their customers, and knowing that they could call and speak to a human and have a conversation that was grounded in something concrete for those two people to both understand versus just, essentially
mm.
turfing off any of the human interaction that made Klarna successful, which was to help people have flexibility in paying. And so,
Hmm.
unfortunately, they damaged their brand so significantly that, it was all over the news and people were very frustrated and quick to let them know. And I think that's the thing that is really important for leaders to understand. If this doesn't go well, it will not go well on a grand stage.
True.
There will be it will be very obvious. It
Yeah.
won't be under the carpet. It will be in social media. It will be well discussed and well covered by media outlets. Everyone sort of has a point of view. And when you're looking for that point of view that, hey, this isn't done well, they will spread that information. So it was perhaps the right intent to use a new technology that
Yeah.
brought efficiency and savings to a corporation. And again, likely because the CEO's number one job is to drive shareholder value.
Yep.
And I think that knowing that that's the CEO's job, it isn't customer retention, it's shareholder value. It actually isn't to have people feel belonging and job satisfaction. It's shareholder value. So you
Sure.
can see the incentive
Yeah.
plan. to replace things with AI. It's so seductive.
Well, that's the exact word I was thinking about. And this is not to point the finger at one company or one senior leadership team making these kinds of decisions. I think this is the risk. It's a really important case study that we can all learn from, because there are times when even as individuals, we are seduced into wanting to go with the quick and easy, like AI deployment in something that would, simplify our own lives, or something in, if you're own your own business, something that again could seemingly drive some increased measurable tracking of success. But what is important is to look at what immeasurable components we might be losing when we move too fast. And it's again not a call, I think, to stop, but to really pause and think about, how do we, yes, we're incentivized to drive towards that shareholder value if we're a corporation, or we're trying to drive to have competitive advantage in the marketplace if you own your own business, or even just pure efficiency on the personal level. But how do we strike that balance? And there's other companies that have fallen into this trap as well. Do you want to reflect a couple of that we were talking about this morning? I thought you had a couple good points.
Yes, for me, the one that really hit home was the Air Canada.
Mm,
They had a chatbot that had a conversation with a grieving customer for a bereavement fare,
mm,
and that discount didn't exist, right? So it hallucinated in some way. And then when the customer sought the discount, Air Canada argued that the chatbot was a separate legal entity, and so they were not going to honor that price. And they weren't responsible for what the chatbot shared on their own website, and a Canadian tribunal ruled against them. So
mm,
the chatbot was removed immediately. And what that says is, when you turf or you outsource things that are uniquely and deeply human,
mm.
and you're making claims
Yeah,
and making promises to your customer base,
yeah,
that's a risk that should have been thought about with leadership. And so they shipped really quickly with this chatbot.
yeah,
And then there were scenarios that this came back to damage their reputation,
yeah,
which they hold in high esteem.
yeah,
So again, from the leadership vantage point, it isn't that you shouldn't, it's that you should with caution and strategic insights, and slowing down so you can actually move more swiftly, stealthily, and accurately.
yeah.
Because this was a fumble that everyone got to see. It was very much a dirty laundry situation, and for an airline to in some way make someone's bereavement even worse is the worst thing for their
Oh
brand.
my God. Can you even imagine that person? And then how that's just fire in terms of spreading that kind of, brand damaging
Yes,
news story. As you were
exactly.
talking, it made me think also, I hadn't thought about this until just now. In my leadership development work, oftentimes I'm doing executive coaching engagements, and I do what's called 360-degree feedback processes, where you either interview a number of different stakeholders and kind of on their perception of this leader and their brand and their impact, or you send out a survey that can kind of measure their leadership behavior and their leadership brand's impact. And not too long ago, there was one leader who participated in another leader's 360-degree feedback process via a survey. And there was a place where you could do kind of an open-ended reflection on the strengths and strengths overused, unintended consequences of when a leader leverages their strengths so far that they're over-indexing one way, not on the other side. So we even the speed versus quality, we can over-index on that in as a personal brand. When I got
Right.
the feedback back, I was like, well, that's interesting. This one person's comment, and everything's kind of anonymous, but you could tell that one person, can you guess? Was using ChatGPT or one of the large language models. And it had, the quintessential tone of AI, and it had the double dash. And I was like, that's so interesting, because also in a recent offsite, one of the leaders had been called out by their team members that you need to stop relying on large language models to speak for you. It's gonna, like, we can always tell your input because it sounds like ChatGPT. And I'm like, oh
Mhm.
goodness, if this is that same person, we didn't know. But again, this is how we can really damage our own leadership brand unintentionally. So again,
Mhm.
it might seem speedy, efficient. I'm going to get this, like, get this 360 off my to-do list. I don't want to be bothered by another reminder email. So let me just use ChatGPT. And then suddenly your leadership brand, again, that's a confidential one, but over time, if you're more pronounced about it, it could really damage you.
Yeah, it's a tell, right?
Yeah.
It's a tell of how mindful and present you are as a leader.
Yeah.
And there are great things to outsource. And that's where you come in with your leadership, deeply human leading labs is helping people make discerning decisions on when you bring in a tool that will amplify at a high level and high speed. And then the stakes are so high,
Yeah.
especially when you're looking at the numbers that these corporations are. This isn't one or two agents. This is an army of agents coming in and replacing human workers. And what it has replaced is, firstly, institutional knowledge.
Mhm.
And I think one of the most important things is context. There isn't a contextual knowledge. Yes, there's pattern recognition, there's speed. And again, the dashboard they're measuring at the very beginning, which is part of the sales pitch, right? There are a lot of people out there selling really clever AI
Mhm.
agents and products that blow your mind, where you're like, oh my gosh, I want to live in a future where everything is done for me and AI interprets my thoughts, wishes and dreams and executes it. But it isn't there yet. And just because we could,
Should we?
does that mean we should?
Right. And then we get out of balance with, there's an intent gap going on here. What is our
Right.
intent? And one of the things I'm really realizing with AI, it really, again, because it pours gasoline on everything, it amplifies your leadership capability. So I notice as a leader, pre-AI, right? A lot of leaders that I work with and coach had a harder time being really crisply clear on the what and the why and allowing space for their team to do the how. Sometimes if you're over into the how, you're micromanaging, you're under clarifying the what or the why. People are confused around what the future state is, so there's like a
Yeah.
delicate balancing act. With AI, your inability to do that well further actually exacerbates the situation because you're not making decisions with that broader context. You're not thinking about the full balancing of what we're trying to achieve, why we're trying to achieve it. If we do it this way with this how, then is there any unintended overuse or some consequence from the overuse of that, right? I think it was CNET, wasn't it, Gretchen, that ended up also succumbing to the seduction of
Oh,
using
yes.
large language models to write. I think it was over. I started. It's terrible to me that like they didn't announce that they were going to use AI to write articles, but I think there were about 77 different financial articles that went out using AI, and they were found to be inaccurate. Now, around
Yeah.
financial news, even a little bit more like, oh goodness, what kind of decisions were people perhaps
Well, the
making?
math wasn't even right. The math didn't even math in a financial. So, it was that seduction of speed
Yeah.
and content. The drive to grab attention, to get someone's attention and hold it is the ultimate currency,
Yeah.
right? And so they were driven to make decisions to deploy these AI tools to write these 77 articles that were, highly errored. They weren't at all part of their brand. Now they're unreliable. They've been downgraded. And there's no congruence, right?
Right.
What they deployed doesn't match what their brand was, like their mission. I haven't been on CNET, haven't read CNET's mission statement, but my guess isn't to be unreliable.
No, and I'm sure that took, a number of years, decades even, right, to
Yes.
kind of build and then instantaneously can be
Yes.
lost, right?
Right. So the moving at the speed of AI is also, it's again, we'll use the word seductive, but trust is, as you know, and the old adage is built over time and lost in an
Instant,
instant.
right? Yeah.
And when you're working with your leaders, Leanne, how do you help them when there is pressure from their boards or even maybe internal pressure
Yeah.
from their teams, even their IT teams, again, how many people do you think are calling on these companies right now?
Yeah.
Hi, I've got this great product. We have the best AI for you. We will match your brand voice. We are, our agents are, they're not going to mess up your situation. They're going to have their
Trust
sales pitch.
us, to trust
Trust
your,
us.
yeah,
Yeah.
customer relationships, right? And
Yeah.
of course it's not out of malintent, but again, it falls
No.
into that whole speed, efficiency, cost paradigm. So what I and actually a lot of the senior leaders that I work with are confronting this in C-level conversations or board conversations, and the AI arms race breathless pace is starting to drive a kind of almost like hyper accelerated adrenaline cortisol driven decision making frenzy in some organizations, if I were to humbly say it that way. So the leaders that successfully manage that, because you're also surrounded with a lot of individuals that want to feel like their careers are going to be enhanced if they show that they're like forward thinking and they're putting an AI solution in place and they're innovating for the future, et cetera. And you don't want to be perceived as like a Luddite, kind of like holding back progress, right? So
Mhm.
the problem that I see is a lot of organizations think of things in sort of black or white, linear, yes or no, on or off, problem solving kind of mentality. Whereas in actuality, everything that we've been circling around in this entire conversation is where there are two seemingly opposing forces that are actually mutually complementary. So if you get it right on speed, but you then overdo speed at the expense of quality, you get some of the cases that we've talked about today. Now, you could go the other way and slow down so much to talk about quality and preserving what the quality has been that you make no movement forward to introduce some experiments on AI. And I have some clients that probably fall in that camp as well, where they're really careful to protect all of that institutional knowledge. And maybe they've been in existence for over 300 years or 150 years in another example of another organization. And they're very concerned about the quality of all of the customer relationships, the quality of the trust that they've built, and they're missing out on opportunities to experiment with
Mhm.
greater speed and efficiency. So it's not an either or, it's a both and, but that doesn't translate well for linear minds where we have been measuring, especially Wall Street, measuring on certain metrics where these things are looking at the not just the measurable but the immeasurable, and it's the balance in that dialogue that makes for quality contextual intelligence and quality decision making. And that's really, I think, what we have the opportunity to do here. But it takes courage to slow
Mhm.
down and introduce this paradox construct when everyone around you is coming from a black or white, not everyone, that might be
Right.
hyperbole, but a lot of people around you are
What
coming from a black or white perspective.
Yeah, I would agree, my sensing of the space that there is a high amount of frenzy.
Yeah.
It's very frenetic
Mhm.
energy. It's not balanced or centered energy. The headlines that we're digesting nonstop are AI is replacing human jobs. And so the work at Deeply Human Leading is so critical. It's preparing leaders for the not only the decision-making process of what, how, and when, but during,
Yeah.
when it is within and embedded within the organization.
Yeah.
So tell me, Leanne, do you see AI delivering the promise thus far? What's the data tell us? Because this is also a really interesting data point. Is it successful doing it, and has it been worth it?
So it's so early on in a lot of organizations' deployment of AI that they're going to see a lot of great positive metrics. And I mean, if we're even looking at the personal gains for productivity and efficiency, even as we deployed it in our own business context, Gretchen, we've seen the
Yeah.
exponential increases. So absolutely, there are a lot of green light dashboards out there in terms of improvements, and they're mind-boggling. And we're probably at the, on the vertical side of the exponential curve. So it's hard to even comprehend how much these like step changes are driving efficiency. But speed is progress. Jumps in productivity are progress, But without slowing down to consider the paradox, I worry that there may be other costs that are perhaps hidden at first and then come back to bite us later, right? And
Yeah.
that may be the unseen, the immeasurable. And so that could be one of the most expensive
Oof.
kinds of impacts that we
Yes. Well, and
hit us
reputational damage,
for sure.
right? There's the real cost. Klarna had to rehire all of those people.
Right.
And there's reputational damage. And then the trust. So your reputation's in tatters. You're spending time trying to rebuild the trust that was squandered, but not intentionally. It wasn't intentional. We should be, you know, the paradox is that people are not trying to destroy companies. People are trying to be efficient and use this as a tool. But using tools without training, you can hurt yourself. And, it's like being a chef and getting really sharp knives. If you don't, and then trying to cut, or onions really, really fast, you could lose a finger. You just want to make sure that you have some training and
Yeah.
some groundedness with the people around you. And it's difficult when there's a frenzy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you offer, is really helping people become congruent. What do you value? And then what are you doing?
And with
And
every decision, what do we gain in efficiency, cost, things that are measurable? Is there anything that we lose, right? And what's the value of that? And what can't be measured sometimes in our logical linear society has been undervalued. But a lot of what I do in team cohesion work is there's an energy within a team that is actually splintering it under pressure. So the more that change comes and hits it, it's splintering it. And what we do is we create more cohesion. There are some tools that we use that can show some measurable progress, but a lot of it is also creating a space for quality dialogue and decision making together that enhances the immeasurable components like trust, like clarity, like confidence, like cohesion. And so I guess that's the question we want to leave you all with today. Every organization is going to be deploying AI just to keep up in this marketplace. No matter what your role is, where there are opportunities to balance speed with quality, and you could be in an organization that's driving so hard and fast that they risk losing the quality, or you could be in an organization where there's such long conversations on quality that we're not going to get around to AI, but by that point, it's going to come. We might be in a very, very difficult position to regain any market share, essentially, right? How can you balance the discussions in your sphere, in your group, in your team? And if you're a founder and owner of your own business, think about how you might balance the speed and quality for yourself. Have a conversation with the team around what do we gain? What might we lose? How do we balance for that? And try some experiments, right? Small experiments that test how this will land, get some customer feedback, iterate from there. I think it's going to become a much more critical leadership skill as we go forward.
I believe 100%. And thank you for the courage to bring this forward and bringing your skills to this space, because as we've said many times, AI is here. And so having the leadership abilities, the generative leadership abilities to manage disruption and the speed of change is critical in this time. Thank you so much, Leanne.
We'll see you guys all next time. Thanks, Gretchen. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks for spending this time with us. If something landed, sit with it. That pause is actually where the real work happens. And if you're navigating this shift at your organization and you'd like to bring this conversation inside your walls, go ahead and find us at deeplyhumanleading.com. If today's episode landed with you, share it with somebody that you think could really use it. The ripple starts there. Until next time, stay curious and stay human.